This is Dan Abbott. I'm making this video for my class at Southern Maine Community College to show you how to create a drawing from an existing part and set up dimensioning so that the drawing itself will be dimensioned properly. As you know, I am not a fan of the way that SolidWorks places dimensions by default, and that means you're going to have to make some changes before adding dimensions. I'm also not a fan of the SolidWorks title block, so you're going to have to use a different title block when you create this drawing. This part is a connector plate. The dimensions for the connector plate are here. What I want you to do is to set up this drawing with 4 views and an isometric view, and then place all the dimensions that are necessary to complete the part. And I want you to do that in such a way that the drawing is clear, concise, and unambiguous. And one of the things I'm going to show you is how to place a view and then project directly off of that view to another. But I'm also going to show you a trick for creating a partial view without a whole lot of effort. To begin with, I'll go back to the SolidWorks part. You can either create a drawing from scratch and then select the part, or you can be in the part file and then make a drawing from the part. There's a drawing file with the same name as a model. I don't want to open that. I'm going to start a brand new drawing. Don't select any of the really awful SolidWorks title blocks that are available to you. Instead, you're going to go and browse to a location on our R drive. And that location will contain a folder for our class, locate another folder called Templates SolidWorks, and I want you to use one of these templates so that the title block you're using is going to be one that is proper for our department. You can choose A size inch, A size metric, B size inch, B size metric. Since this part is a metric part and I need a little bit of room for it, I'm going to pick TB metric. Now that shows you a different title block. I pick OK, and that's the title block I want you to use. We're going to start by just bringing in a front view. That front view can be used to project a top view, but then I want you to stop. The reason I want you to stop is that I'd like you to create a left side view and a right side view that are partial views. The technique I'm going to use for that is not going to be to project a view off, because if I were to project a view off, go to View Layout, Projected View, what I would get is the left end, and in the background I'd get the right end. If I went the other way, I'd get the right view, and in the background I'd get the left end. So instead what I'm going to do is to create a section view. Or actually, more precisely, I'm going to create a partial view using the section view tool. So what I want to do is put the section view cutting plane line outside and say I want to place this view, flip my direction so it looks like that, this view, and then I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to grab that section line, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hide the cutting line. Now I don't want everything I'm seeing here, including that tangent edge. So I'll right click on the part, go to tangent edge, and I'll remove that tangent edge so it looks like this. Now I'm going to click the part and go over to the left hand panel, and under section depth I'm going to select that, and I'm going to move that magenta bar to the middle of the part, pick OK, and now what that's doing is giving me a partial view by only giving me a view from the left that goes as deep as that section depth line that I put in. We'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to pick a section view. I'm going to go outside the view. I'm going to pick OK, put the view over here, section depth. I'm going to take that depth sign and bring it inside, pick OK, right click on the part, hide tangent edges. So now I have a right side partial view and a left side partial view, and I have a top view. I'm also going to get rid of the viewing plane line. It's not really a cutting plane line anymore. It's a viewing plane line because it doesn't cut through the part. But I don't want to see it because I just want projected views. Now I also want to get rid of tangent edges in the front view. So it looks like this. And if there were any tangent edges in the top view, and there's one right there, I want to get rid of that as well. Don't show your tangent edges unless you need to show them for an isometric view. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to do a projected view from the front view, and I'm going to bring it up here and make it an isometric view. Now I'm going to move it in place, and I'm going to change the scale from 1 to 1 to 1 to 2, because the only purpose of that is just to demonstrate what the part looks like so someone can get a quick visual image of it. I'm going to go in here and hide tangent edges, and when I do, what you'll notice is that I lose a little bit of the sense of what's going on here. That's what it would look like without tangent edges, and I'd be perfectly happy with this. But there are times in an isometric view when it would be better to use tangent edges with font so that it's clear that you've got tangencies. They're demonstrated with a phantom line font, but it doesn't actually indicate what the part would look like. In this particular case, I don't really want those tangent edges, and in fact, what I might want is to see the part so that it looks like that, or I could say I want the part so it looks like this, either one. Now you have to decide if you want hidden lines showing anywhere. On the handout, I do show hidden lines right here on both the left view and the right side view, but those hidden lines aren't really necessary because there's so many of them that it's not really helpful to see what's being represented. And I don't show hidden lines on the top. So for the purpose of demonstrating their control over individual views, I'm going to leave the hidden lines out of the left view and the right view, but I am going to place them in the top view. So I'm going to leave the left view and the right view the way they look. I'm going to come up here and go to the left, and I'm going to select hidden lines, and that's what it would look like if I showed all the hidden lines. Now you might decide that this also is too confusing to be helpful, in which case we can go back to this, or we could delete certain hidden lines and leave the others in. Because of the large number of holes in this, what I think I'm going to do for this video is just leave them the way they are. Now before we start adding dimensions, there are two things we need to do. SolidWorks, because we have a pattern here, automatically put the center lines in. And because these holes are so small, it's actually perfectly okay to have a center mark that's larger than the hole itself. And I could leave those center lines in there the way they are, and I think I will. But the object lines and the center lines are just too close to being the same thickness by default in SolidWorks. So now we're going to go up to Options, which is a little gear at the top. I'm going to select Options. And there are two kinds of options. Options that are considered system options, which apply to everything you do, and then document properties options, which apply only to the current document. First thing I'm going to do is go down to line style. No, line font. Okay, under line font. Visible edges at the moment are set to, oh, this is in inches. First thing I'm going to do, and I forgot to do that, is go down to my units and change from IPS to MMGS. Now I'm going to go back to Options. Under Options and Document Properties, I'm going to go to Line Font. And you notice the thickness for object lines is 0.25. For other lines, it's 0.18. That is not a 2-to-1 ratio. It's just not proper. So what I'm going to do is change the 0.25 to well, I'm going to go to 0.35. I think that's actually good enough. And 0.35 is about twice all of the other ones. So now if I come on and go to hidden, you'll notice that my object line just got heavier. The other thing I need to do is change some dimension settings. Again, I'm going to go to Options. Under Document Properties, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have ANSI and not ISO selected as my dimension style. ISO will give you dimensions that are aligned. We don't want that in the United States. We want ANSI instead. This is one place where, although I'm a big fan of the metric system, I'm not a big fan of the ISO standards for drawings. So we'll leave that as ANSI. Now I'm going to go to the dimension item and then open that up. And I'm just going to go down and say, all right, what do we want to do here that might be a little different? What I want is text of a certain height, arrowheads of a certain length, dimensions placed a certain way. So I'm going to go to the dimensions selection. And under font, I'm coming over here and I'm going to change the height of the text from 3.175 to 3. 3.175 is a hard conversion from 1/8 of an inch. We don't need anything quite that specific. I want my dimensions to be slightly smaller. And in fact, for this purpose, I'm going to go down to 2.5, which is as small as I'm going to let you make your dimensions, because if they get too much smaller, they become hard to read if you have to make a copy of it. Century Gothic is close to a single stroke Gothic lettering style, so I'm going to leave it at that. Now I've modified my design, my drafting design. Now over here for the arrowheads, I'm going to change that to 2.5 as well. And since I've got that at 2.5, I'm going to change the width of that to 0.9. Now you don't have to be quite this specific, but why not? Precision, in this case, what I want for precision is 2 decimal places. And the reason I want 2 decimal places is because it's a metric drawing and that would be standard. But in the metric system, we do not want zeros to show up after the decimal point. We do want them to show up before the decimal point. So down here I'm going to say include leading zero for values less than 1. And then down here for trailing zeros, I'm going to say remove. For tolerances, show, and properties will show them because it gives us some little better information. Otherwise, the only thing I'd rather do, I'm sorry, the only thing I'm going to do over here is under extension lines beyond the dimension line. Right now it's set for 3. I'm going to set that to 1.5 because I think that will give me more room, and I don't like having those long extension lines. Now you can change individual items for diameter, for instance. So I come down here, and if when I do a diameter, I want to change the primary precision, or I want to do something having to do with arrows where I foreshorten things so that they don't have to go out as long, I can make some changes there. I can indicate how I want whole callouts to be shown. I'm going to leave this for now and just get on to center lines and center mark. I'm going to use extended lines. I don't want to scale them by view scale. I want them to all come in the same length. And I don't want my extensions on this to be 6 millimeters. I want them to be 1.5. And I want the center line, center mark size to be 3. I'm going to go ahead and say I want a layer for center lines, and I'm going to create a layer and put the center marks on that layer. But I'll have to create that layer by going outside and doing another layer. So let me get OK on this. Now I want to create layers for this drawing. In order to do that, I have to turn on the layer toolbar. So I'm going to move my cursor up to the menu that has all the commands and right click, and that gives me a list of all of the toolbars available. I'm going to go down and turn on the layer toolbar, which by default comes in at the bottom. This drawing has a few layers because I created them when I made the style for the title block. I'm going to go over and create a new one, and the new layer I'm going to create is going to be called center. And I'm going to put both center marks and center lines on that, and I'll go ahead and make the color of that green. I also would like to have a special layer for dimensions. So I'm going to make another layer, call it dim, and I'll make that layer blue. That way I can turn the dimensions off if I want to get rid of them, or I can have them showing. It's really a lot like the AutoCAD layer command, but in a very simplified form. Now when I look at this, I'm looking at what I think is too big a gap, and so I think I made a mistake. I'm going to go back to options, and under options, I'm going to go down to drafting and dimensions, and I'm going to pick center lines and center marks, and I'm changing the size from 3 to 1.5, and I'm changing the gap from 2.5 to 1.5. That's what's going to give me what I want. Pick OK. Now I'm happier with the way those center marks look. Go back to options and do one other thing. The other thing I want to do under options is for center lines and center marks, I want to place them on the center layer. Now that I have a center layer, I can go ahead and pick that. So when they come in, they're going to automatically be placed on that layer. That won't be true of the marks that have already been placed. But we're going to put a center line over here. So I'm going to come up to annotation, center mark. I'm going to say put a center mark here. And now it asks if I want to propagate it. And I'm going to say propagate it all the way around. And you notice what it did is it put a circular center mark on here. When I zoom in on it, it's now on the center layer if I select that. And it's using the attributes that I set up before, and that's giving me what I consider a proper circular center line and a center mark that has the same sizes. If I came over here and did the same thing, so let's put center marks on this, and I'm going to propagate those. Because I use a linear pattern when I did this, it'll put center marks that connect everything. Now, I don't really want that in this case because I don't want that line coming all the way down through, so I'm just going to erase it. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it like that. All of these center marks, if I want to get rid of them, I can do that by deleting them, but I have to delete them all one at a time unless I put a window around them, in which case I can do that. and that. Now, this means I can go back and put a center mark in, do the same thing, propagate those, come over here and put a center mark here, propagate those. Okay, I'm deleting that. Put a center mark here, and you know it's not going to let me propagate them, so I'm going to have to just go and pick them all. I could mirror the center marks from the other side, but I'll go ahead and just pick them all for right now. I actually thought it would be propagated because we mirrored a linear pattern, so I'll have to look into that and see what's going on. But I could also put a center mark on the slot like that, and I could put center marks and center lines elsewhere, which I will do up here. So I'm going to put a center line that goes between here and here. So now that'll put a little center line in there for me to show that that's a circular part. I'm not going to add all the dimensions in this video, but if you take a look at the original drawing, what I'll do is I'll dimension this left-hand side and show you how to place dimensions and use some of the tools in SolidWorks so that the spacing is done correctly. I'll show you how to annotate a dimension by putting information in front of the actual dimension, and I'll show you down here how to set up a chamfer dimension, and then I'm going to let you determine based on that how to do the other dimensions. But what I'd like you to do is to make the part look like this. Don't forget you've got more space between the first dimension and the object than you have in prior dimensions. That's maybe a little more obvious over here. That 10 should be about 9 millimeters away. Then all the other dimensions should be about 6 millimeters from each other. Those are pretty much the defaults in SolidWorks, so you don't have to make any changes there. So let's go back to SolidWorks and start adding some dimensions. The dimensions are going to be added by going to Annotation, Smart Dimension. So I'm going to put a dimension down here from this edge to that hole right there. Now I can pick the hole itself, and you notice I get this little double button, sort of a split button. The orange one allows me to pick that point and have it automatically place the dimension correctly. Now if I take my next dimension and make it go from here to here, say yeah, put that in, and then the next dimension and make it go from here to here, and say yeah, put that in. What it's done is it spaced my dimension here about 9, and then it spaced that one about 6, and it spaced, no, I mean exactly 6, it spaced that one 6. And SolidWorks has kind of little indents. You notice I'm moving this and it kind of jumps into a position, jumps into a position. This one right here jumps into a position. So unlike AutoCAD that would not place your first dimension for you properly, this one does, and it leaves the spacing correct. Now if I'm running out of room, I'll go back in options and I'll make that dimension spacing a little less, maybe make it 5, and maybe make this a little less, maybe make it 8, because it'll still give me a distinction that is a bigger dimension space for the first dimension, but it also gives me more room to add my dimensions. Now we'll go back to Smart Dimension, and I'll say I want another dimension from here to here. It's going to go over here, that's my 10. Now I will put the 60, which is the overall dimension from here to here. And again, all I have to do is pick this. This is only if rapid dimensioning is turned on, by the way. So let's see what that looks like right now. I'm going to dimension from here to here. Now, rapid dimensioning turned on, if we look over on the left, it is turned on by default. There's also something called a dim expert that you might want to use, but I'm going to discourage that for now. So now if I had turned off rapid dimensioning, I would not see that little circle that comes up to indicate where I want to put it, in which case then I'd have to just drag my dimension over and put it where I want it to go. But you notice there's some indents there too, so I can do that. Just make sure you move and stagger your dimensions so they don't line right up. You don't want that because it looks like 1260. You want that to be staggered off. And there's another dimension that is down here. You can also pick the center line for this dimension too, by the way. So now those all line up. They're understandable. I'll come over here and I'm going to use Smart Dimension, but this time I'm going to say I want to do a chamfer dimension. And I'll pick those two lines right here, and that will automatically place a chamfer dimension of 5 space x space 45 because I use a chamfer tool to put that. Since there are two of them though, I want to put a 2x indicating 2 places in front of it. So I'll go over to the left hand panel, down here where it has dimension in the double brackets, the less than on one side, the greater than on the other, that makes that the default. So I'll put a 2, a capital X, and a space, And now what I've got is a symbol for two places, 2 no space x, and then the symbol for times, 5 times, or by, you could think, 5 by 45 degrees. The only other dimension left on here is to the center of the slot. I'll throw a center mark in here. It comes in on the right layer because I created a layer. I'll smart dimension from there to there, drag it over, and you notice it just jumps into place. So now I've got my 30, I've got the 10, I've got all the dimensions that I need for that view except for that. So I'll put another dimension on that hole, and the reason this is called smart dimension is because it knows it's a hole, and it's going to put the hole size on here. It doesn't know how many I have. I probably don't want to have that go right through the corner of my part. So I'm going to come down a little bit like this, come back over to the side, and I'm going to indicate how many there are. And there are 4 in this view, so 4x space. Now one thing I notice on my handout is that I left off a dimension of these holes over here. And let me see, did I leave that off? I did. That was inadvertent. But the reason I'm mentioning it now is that I look and see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 16, 10, 26. I have 52 holes right here. So someplace over here I need to indicate that by putting a dimension on at least one of the holes. I'm putting it down here just to get it out of the way of some of the other dimensions. So I'll bring it over here like this. I come over to the left hand side. I say there are 56 of these, x space, also a dimension diameter of 4. Now go ahead and put the rest of your dimensions in. When you're done, make sure that you have spacing that makes sense. You don't need that section symbol right there, so we can actually hide that. Right click and hide that one. Now when you're done, the last thing you have to do is to put some text down here. And to do that, I'm going to have you just use the text tool. Under annotation, it's called a note. So now you can go ahead and put a title in. When you do that though, you need to go and change the height. In this case, not 3 millimeters, but 6 millimeters because it's a title. So we'll do connector plate on that. Again, Century Gothic is close to being single stroke Gothic. And then when you put some more text, bring it over here. And now I'm going to make that 2.5 to match all the rest of my text. And so for a date, you put whatever the date is. Today's the 18th, 2018. And the scale of this drawing is 1:1. Come back up here. Now you finish that. Now why is that coming in on the dimension layer? Because the dimension layer is a current layer. That's fine if you want to put it on another layer like a text layer or even a title block layer. You can do it by selecting the object, go over to the layer tool, picking title block, and now it's on the title block layer. I can pick more than one thing and then go over to the layer tool, and again I'll pick the title block layer. Now it's on the same as the title block. Fill in the entire title block, and then over here the material would be identified. In this case, I think I told you to make it 1020 steel. You're also going to indicate how we're going to interpret this, which of the ASME standards. There's 2 that are being used still, the 1994 standard and the 2009 standard. So I'm just going to go and take and draw a line through the one I don't want being used to interpret it. So I'll just cross that out. So that means we're going to use the 2009 standard. Once you've got all the title block filled in and have completed the dimensioning, now you can save this file in your grade folder, and I'll go ahead and